Okay. I believe we are live. Let me just make sure that it is actually streaming. And woohoo! Manage analytics. There we go. Hey y'all. I'm glad to be here. So if you have any questions, go ahead and leave those in the comments. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have. I'll be kind of trying to scroll through them as, yeah, that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It's hard to kind of keep up with them. But just trying to get this all set up. There we go. Frank, Jim, Martin, Christopher, having fun. Yeah, I don't have, actually, I don't think I have any questions that were given to me ahead of time. So if maybe you have a question, go ahead and leave them here. Let's see, James Nielsen, Silas Tays. I gotta pause that. It is a pain to hear myself. One thing I did want to say, I got a ton of questions today on the video I just put out on a tool roll. And one of the main questions that came out from it was, why do you put the blades out? And the big reason, the one I didn't actually mention in the video, and I wish I had, is that I had another tool roll that I used to keep them blades in because all the pockets were too small, until one day the blades started to actually work through the tip, and it jabbed me when I was carrying it, and I still have a scar from that. So that's why that's the big reason why I keep blades out, because they're not going to shift around, they're not going to come out, they're not going to cut through. And it's safer for me to have them blades out. Plus, I can also see what it is. So when I'm looking at all these chisels I have out, I can pick the one that I want as opposed to slowly going through them and trying to find the one I want. So that was the big question that was happening today on the video. But yeah, wow. Oh, my word! There's a lot of people on here today. Wow. Antonio. Ah, there we go. Antonio Crespo asked, sorry, you guys are going to be butchering everyone's name tonight. That's not my strong suit. Sorry. Do you recommend modern steel button chisels? I'm guessing you're talking about like the plastic handle with a steel cap on the end. Yes and no. Most modern chisels like that are pretty much junk. The blade is not going to hold an edge for very long at all. I mean, they're still a chisel and you can get into them, but they're not high quality. Some of them have the shaft that actually goes all the way up to that button, and those are great because the power can actually transfer all the way through a lot easier. You're probably going to be wanting to use a metal hammer on them as opposed to a wooden hammer or a wooden mallet, so you're not banging it up. Like the old Stanley Everlasting chisels, Everlast chisels. Those actually, the button on the end is the same piece of steel that goes all the way through. I have several of those. I like them a lot. They're great for doing mortises. But for most things, I like the wooden end. It just has a better feel to it when you hit it with a wooden mallet. So I hope that answered your question. If not, go ahead and throw it in again. Liverpool. Hey there, Eddie. Man, there's a lot of people on here. It's great to see everyone in here. Big Screen Bird asks, are you interested in doing my palette challenge? It's a video on my YouTube channel. I'll have to look it out. Send me a link. I don't think I've seen it. I might. I've done a couple other palette challenges. I don't use palette woods that often, but occasionally I do. You can usually find good wood fairly cheap there. So yeah, send me a link. I'll definitely take a look at it. How is the lathe idea coming? It's coming. This is from Silas Tays. Excuse me. Yeah, just finished dinner, so food is having fun with me. Silas Tays asked, how is the lathe idea coming? It is. I'm going to be starting on it as soon as I finish with the dresser. And I'm just kind of waiting on that because I don't want to start a big project in the middle of a big project in the middle of a small shop. So I'm really pushing to get the dresser done here soon. I've been working on it fairly heavily over this last week, and I'm really trying to get that done. But yes, the next big thing after that is building a large flywheel and lathe, and I'm really looking forward to doing that. Oh, hey, hi. Oh, wow, there are a lot of people on here. Josh Martin. Josh Mann. Man, not Martin. Hi, James. What's your estimate for finish, for the finish your wife's dresser, chest of drawers? My goal is to have it done by her birthday, which is the end of May. But I would like to have it done sooner. I would really like to have it done late February, early March, but we will see. I'm currently in the middle of I'm doing the finish sizing on all the panels for piston fit drawers. So just making them all fit exactly how they need to be. The next thing I'm going to be doing, hopefully next week, is doing some dovetail work. So we'll see how that goes. But I've got a couple videos planning on coming out, like for sizing up the panels for piston fit, dovetail works, resawing for the bottoms. I'm going to be doing some fun things on the top of the dresser. And there's a lot of little detail things. So I've got about 4 more how-to videos and about 2 or 3 more session videos. And then I'd like to do one video at the end of the total recap of the project. So it's coming, but it'll be a little while still. John Paul Manola, not a hand tool guy, but what should I buy first? When I first got started, I bought a cheap rusted plane, a set of chisels from Harbor Freight, and a saw that I got for free with a rebate from a big box store. And with those things, I built my bench basically, and I've purchased other things as I need them, but I usually only purchase tools to accomplish a task. I don't purchase tools to buy a tool. So if I see a task coming that I'd like to have a tool for, that's when I start looking at the tool. So I would ask you, what do you want to build? But for most things, a simple crosscut saw will get you a long ways. A Stanley number 4 or number 5, you'll be able to do most everything with that, and a set of chisels. And you can build most anything with those. I built my bench basically with a Stanley number 4 and 5, a set of chisels, and a crosscut saw from the store. So yeah, that's where I would generally start. Hi, James. Was just listening to Crafted Podcast number 4. Oh, thanks. We just actually recorded the next one. Yeah, and if any of you are interested, we record the podcast live Thursday nights at 7 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern. And so we actually have a live chat where you can join us and we pull questions out of that. It's a lot of fun. And you mentioned a technique for doing finger joints on a table saw. I couldn't picture it. Can you please explain it again? Okay, well, let's say you have the blade of the table saw and you have a fence that comes up behind it, or a, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically a 90, not a fence, it's a, boy, I've been away from the table saw too long, I can't even remember the terms. A crosscut sled. And what you basically do is, however thick you want your pin to be, let's say a 1/2 inch, you cut 2 blocks that are exactly the same thickness at 1/2 inch, and you put one of them up against the blade, and you put another one right beside it, and you attach that second one to your sliding, I forgot the word already again, crosscut sled, there you go, and you attach that to the crosscut sled, so that basically you have a 1/2 inch block exactly a 1/2 inch away from the blade. And what that allows you to do is you put a board down, and it keeps cutting until it hits that block, and then you can slide the peg over to the block, and it will cut a 1/2 inch space away. And so basically you're leaving a 1/2 inch tooth hanging down between the blade and that stop. And then after you've cut everything, that tooth can go over and it's your next stop. And so basically you're just creating that space on either side. It's a really hard thing to explain. There's a bunch of YouTube videos on it. It's just a a dirt simple way of doing it. It's not very high quality, but it works. And it's simpler to do if you're just doing it the thickness of the blade, so you're not having to move it around. So if you're doing a 1/2 inch one, it becomes a little more difficult because you have to cut it out. But there's a reason I'm a hand tool guy. As soon as you bring power tools into it, things become more complicated. After you complete your sanding, scraping, do you use wood shaves to burnish the surface? This is from Christopher Thompson. No, most of the time I don't. I try to avoid at all costs putting shavings back into it. And when you're rubbing the wood shavings on the surface, it comes out smoother. And part of it is burnishing, but part of it is also filling the pores with the material. So if I'm doing things like maple or other diffuse porous woods, I might burnish with that because the pores are so small it's not going to cause a problem. But with things like white oak and red oak, the pores are so large that when I burnish with wood shavings, I'm just forcing wood into those pores, which isn't a huge issue. It feels great, but I'm looking for a shine that only comes from those pores being empty. So no, I don't burnish as much. Usually the last thing I have that touches the wood is a plane. It gives a much smoother and cleaner surface than scraping, but that's my personal preference. So everyone's a little different. So no, I don't sand as much or scrape as much. What would be a minimum size wood screw for a leg vise? This is from Timon Heavener? Sorry, another name I'm not good with. For a wooden screw, I think the smallest I would go would be 1.5 inches. And no, for a leg vise, I probably wouldn't go any smaller than a 2-inch screw. Just because if the screw is thinner, then the leg will have a tendency to twist. And that isn't very good if you want to clamp something on one side or the other side of the screw. So anything smaller than 2 inches is not very good. The one I have is a 2.5 inch. Works fantastic. If you're doing something like a Moxon vise, then you can go a lot smaller. The ones I have on the one I just made were 1 inch. I'd probably do about 1.5 inches for the next one, but it works fine. Let's see. Hello from Ireland. I love Ireland. I want to get there someday. I'm hoping to purchase a Bucket Boss shop apron, which you have, but shipping from America to Ireland is so expensive. Yes, international shipping is expensive. I'm actually going to be doing a video here soon on making my own apron. I like the Bucket Boss apron in that it has a lot of pockets and a lot of places for it, but it's not perfect. It's not exactly what I want. But for the price, you can't, well, at least in America, you can't beat it. But actually making my own is not that difficult. And so, excuse me, hopefully I'm going to be showing that. I'm going to be making out of the same leather that I made my tool roll out of too. So, James, are you ever coming to California for a meet and greet? C-dubs. I would love to. I don't have any particular plans. There aren't a whole lot of huge woodworking things out on the west coast. Most of that, for some reason, is on the East Coast, and I don't really understand that very much. I actually haven't been out to California for probably about 12 years. I need to do that sometime. Maybe at least make a family vacation. So, yeah, maybe. Hey, TJ, how's it going? If you had to choose between Veritas bevel up smoother or a low angle jack, which would you choose? I'm in the middle of a decision. This is Terry Sutton. A bevel up smoother or a low angle jack, it would depend on what you're going to use it for. I am not a fan of a bevel up smoother. In other words, the last thing to touch the wood. Unless you're working with perfectly straight grained wood. And if you're working with a perfectly straight grained wood, then a bevel up smoother is fantastic. Great. But I am very rarely ever working with that. I'm working with a lot of figured wood. And so I do not smooth with a bevel up plane. It's bad news. Yeah. The low angle jack, though, has a lot of other applications. For a shooting board, it is fantastic. For general milling material, it is fantastic. I think the low angle jack will give you far more versatility than having a number 4 size bevel up plane. At least that would be my personal choice. But again, it depends on what you're going to be using it for. There's a lot of different possibilities. Going down. James, I have a 7 TPI saw that I converted to a rip saw. Cost me 50 cents. Thinking of retoothing. How much? A pitta? Sorry, Jim, I don't know exactly what you're asking. How much a pitta? Yeah, ask it again. I'll see if I can catch it down below. Sorry, Jim. I want to build the Roy Underhill double spring pole lathe. Do you know anyone else know where I can get the plans? This is from Christopher Thompson. Yes, one of the most recent issues, actually, it was about 3 or 4 issues ago. The plans were in Popular Woodworking magazine. So if you go to your library, you might be able to find it on there. You can probably find it on their website too, Popular Woodworking. And that is actually something I want to make here soon. Spring pole lathe is very useful, quick. It's very, very easy to build in comparison to. So I don't use any plans a lot. What are the best ways to store them? What's the best way to store them? I'm looking at socks. Oh, sorry, I don't use planes a lot. You can see how bad my reading is. This is from Benjamin DeBellis. I don't like storing my socks planes long term in a sock because anytime you have fabric, you tend to get moisture, and moisture leads to other problems. I actually just leave them in the open. Put a good layer of oil on them so that it's not going to be rusting, and set them on a shelf. They work fairly well. If you are going to get a sock, get like a waxed fabric. Lee Valley I think Lee Valley sells them. Say, my wife's here. I'm doing a live Q&A. She might pop over and say hey. But yeah, I think Lee Valley sells socks. I know there are several other places, but like a waxed material that's not going to collect moisture is a good thing for that. Socks are more used for temporary storage. In other words, you want to move them from point A to point B, and they add some padding so that they don't jostle around inside of a box. Cool. Big Screen just sent me a link to his challenge. I'll be looking at it. Thanks. I've been listening to the podcast and was wondering how many fingers actually fit into a butt joint. How many fingers actually fit into a butt joint? Not quite understanding what you're asking, Fred. How many? Oh, ha ha ha! Very funny. I had to think about that one. Thanks, Fred. Yeah, we had too much fun with that podcast with all of the innuendos and out-uendos with joint names. Yes, Matthew Button responded, depends on how adventurous you are, Fred. How can I contact you for consulting? I'm in Mexico and there's no way to find hand tool schools here. I don't do any one-on-one consulting just because it's not time efficient and my time is fairly limited. But if you do want to send me an email, I'd be glad to answer your questions and respond. And feel free to do that anytime. My email is jameswright@woodbywright.com. So, yeah, feel free to send me questions anytime. I'd love to answer them. What is the best way to nail handmade nails? This is from Ken Kirkland. I guess I don't know what you're saying other than to use a hammer. Cut nails are they have a taper to them. They're square one way and they have a taper the other way. You want to make sure that the taper is not going to spread the grain. So if the nail is rectangular, you want it to run with the grain. It will pinch in better. Whereas if you turn it 90 degrees so it's running across the grain, it will actually end as a wedge and split the wood apart. So I'm guessing that's what you're asking, but other than that, with a hammer. That was from Ken Kirkland. Thanks for being here, TJ. Glad you could stay in for a little bit. Woodpeckers are a problem in your profession. Woodpeckers, I haven't really had a problem with them. They're not allowed in my shop. Yeah, I don't know what you're asking, but feel free to ask it below, and I might get to it. Probably will. I'm getting close to the end here. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and leave them in here. I'd love to answer them. I'm having a hard time cambering my plane iron, or at least every time I plane tops, I leave tracks. Any advice on working through this, my low-angle jack? This is from Hauser D. A low angle or a bevel up plane is very, very difficult with leaving tracks, especially if you're smoothing. Because it's at such a low angle, you have to camber away a lot more material on the corners. And that's why I do not use, one more reason why I do not use a low angle plane for smoothing. It's just difficult to get the corners to disappear. Now, another problem you might be having with it is that you're taking out too much material too fast. And in other words, your depth of cut is too deep. Especially when you're smoothing, the last thing you want to be doing, the last pass you want to do is just a very, very thin, wispy shaving. In which case, you don't have to camber quite as much away from the iron. Usually when I'm sharpening, I will just kind of pick the blade up and focus on the tip of it, on the very corner of the blade, and we'll do 5-10 strokes on that side and then 5-10 strokes on the other side. That's with a bevel down plane. With a bevel up plane, you're probably going to end up doing like 20-30 strokes. And if you're doing it on a stone as opposed to diamonds, you're going to be cutting into the stone, and that kind of is a problem. But yeah, I don't actually camber the iron. I just focus on the corners, making sure that the corners are rounded. I like to keep the iron itself flat. So I hope that answered your question. If not, leave it down below. Oh, I see. PITA. Let me see if I can go back and find that one. James, I have a 7 TPI saw that I converted to rip. Cost me 50 cents. Thinking of retoothing. How much of a pain is it? 7 TPI, yeah, it's gonna be a good bit of pain. If you're talking about changing it from like 7 TPI to 10 TPI, you're gonna have to flat file the whole thing down, and then mark in new teeth and cut them in. For that process, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 hours, and yeah, it's a lot of work to retooth a saw. If you're talking about just changing the pitch from like rip to crosscut, that's really not that much. It only takes about twice the time it would take to sharpen a saw. So for 7 TPI, probably only 20-30 minutes at max. So it's not a huge deal to change the angle on a tooth. But if you're wanting to file them all down and retooth it, that's a lot of work. I have a 14 TPI Veritas dovetail saw for Christmas. I'm having trouble getting the cut started. Do I need to sharpen the saw before continuing to use? This is from Winsy 316. No, Veritas saws come fully sharpened. That's not something you need to do. I think a lot of times one of the reasons people have a hard time starting it is that they're putting weight down on the blade. Let me grab this. So like I have my saw and I will rest it on here, and a lot of people are trying to push it down and trying to engage the teeth. And really when you're starting the saw, you actually need to be lifting it up. And I want to be putting the weight back on this horn on the back of my hand, so that this weight is actually lifting the blade up. And so as I'm pushing it, I want to think about actually just scratching it. And so I'm actually lifting it up and just barely nicking the top. Some people like to do a draw cut across, which makes it fairly easy. I don't like to do that as much. I like to actually start on the push stroke, but I'm being very careful to take a lot of weight off the end. Especially with sharp saws, when they're sharp and new, if you put much of any weight on there, they're going to catch. And when you're first starting a cut, you're going to be working on the corner of the wood, and it will easily catch and become hard to push. So yeah, don't force it. Just let its own weight take care of what it needs. What plane should I start with if I'm getting started in woodworking? This is from Jeremy Huffman. There are a lot of questions I would come into that. Usually a number 4 or number 5, in other words, in length. So like 9 inches to 15 inches. That length is a good general use that you can do most things with. The big question that most people ask is bevel up or bevel down. I think that a bevel up plane is easier to learn. It is simpler. There are less things to mess with. It's an easy plane to learn. Its downside is that as soon as you start getting into figured wood, it becomes a terror. And I'm almost all figured wood. But most people starting out aren't going to be working a lot with figured wood. You're going to be working with straight grain stuff you get at a lumberyard. And for that, a bevel up plane is fantastic and will do most anything that a Bailey pattern bevel down plane will do. And so like the Veritas bevel up plane is a great plane to learn on. It has its limitations when you get into figured wood, but then it is one of the best planes you can possibly have for doing a shooting board or end grain. That's fantastic for that. If you want to get into learning a little bit more of the ins and outs, and if you think that you would enjoy the art of setting up a plane, which is something I really enjoy, then the traditional Bailey pattern plane is fantastic. It takes a little bit more to set up. It takes more to learn. It's an art in itself in learning how to use one of these. But it can do far more in the end, at least in my opinion. So it kind of goes to that. I mean, do you want to mess with learning to set up the plane at the beginning? In which case, then great. If not, then probably a low angle jack is your best all-around plane. The other one I might consider is the Veritas customizable hand planes. I absolutely love this thing, and it is so much easier to set up with the Norris adjuster. It's just fantastic, and there's a lot more options. Now you're gonna be paying a slightly more premium price for one of these, but even then it's not that bad. But a Veritas customizable plane is fantastic. The only downside with that is you might not know what you want for the customization on it until you've actually been playing with hand tools for a while. So hope that answered your question. Kind of went into things for a while. And thanks for everyone for being on here. This is kind of cool. I wasn't expecting this many people this fast. So, hi James. So restoring old wooden tools like handmade wood plane, like a handmade wood one, it doesn't affect the value and might increase it. This is from Pascal. Generally with wooden hand planes, they are such a dime a dozen that the only value in the market is generally to the decorator and someone who wants to stick it on their wall. So no, most of the time restoring those is not going to hurt the value at all. And with most hand planes, you're not going to hurt the value at all unless you're getting into one of the collectible hand planes. Like if you're getting into a really old number 3 or number 2, or if you ever find a number 1, yeah, don't touch those. They are worth far more just left alone. But for most wooden planes, you're never going to hurt the value restoring them. They are meant to be used or hang on a wall for decoration, and not too many people collect them. Is James Woods your favorite actor? This is from C. Denny. I do not know who James Woods is. Sorry, I don't follow actors. But I do like his first name. I have a blunt, hardened teeth handsaw. Could I cut the teeth off and make new teeth underneath? Yes, you can. You're going to need to file all the teeth down. Well, actually, it's usually easier to cut them off with like a hot cut and then file from there, because you don't want to file through the hardened teeth. You're just going to ruin your file. Yes, you can get rid of all the teeth and create new teeth. That works well. The steel in them is generally decent steel. It's not the best, but it will work. That being said, old hand saws are a dime a dozen. I pick them up in garage sales and antique places for $3 to $5 a piece. And I would much rather work with one of those because the feel of a good designed wooden grip just feels so much better than a plastic grip. But that's me. So each their own. That was from Jason Donnie. I think Donnie. Do you have any tips on removing paint for plane restoration? I don't have a sandblaster and chemicals don't work very well for me. Don V. No, actually, the only ways I've ever removed paint is sandblasting or chemical removers. I don't really have a good way other than that. You can sand it off, but the problem is most castings have a natural texture to them, and you're never going to get it all off. Most of the time, if I'm just going to be doing a quick repaint, I will sand off the loose paint or sand off any transitions from painted areas to non-painted areas, and then paint right over the top of it all. And usually you can't tell the difference. But yeah, usually I'm either going to sandblast or use a chemical paint remover. Either way, yeah. Hey, John Burkett. Look who's running alive. That's me. Yeah, hey, John, message me. I'm going to be out in your area in March. Love to hang out. And just so you guys know, I'm going to be out in Lancaster. I'm hoping to do either Lancaster or Philadelphia. Let's see. I think it's March 18th. It'll be that weekend. So I'm going to be out in that area. I'll also be down in Virginia Thursday and Friday before that. So looking to do a couple meetups while out there. So if any of you are in that area, send me a message. What is the best finish for a kitchen table besides boiled linseed oil? I would never use boiled linseed oil on a kitchen table. Boiled linseed oil and paste wax do not provide a protective finish. They're great for hands because you're constantly getting the oil from your hand on it, and it feels good in the hand. So any of my hand tools, that's what I do. But anything like a coffee table, a regular table, the dresser, I'm going to be putting a solid finish on there. I like to use a wipe-on poly for a lot of things. For a table, I would probably still do a wipe-on poly for a table. It gives a nice protective surface that is not going to scratch up as much, and it becomes far more waterproofed. I do like water locks for a lot of. I don't know if I would use it on a kitchen table, but I might. But for like a dresser or a coffee table, surfaces where you want a bit of protection, but they're not going to be something you're constantly rubbing on, water locks is absolutely fantastic. It goes on very easily, much like a boiled linseed oil, but it gives a film finish, and I really, really like water locks. Yeah, I think those are my two go-to film finishes are water locks and wipe-on poly. Yeah. I want to retooth a saw, 4.5 or 5 TPI. I think I will go shopping instead of filing. Yeah, this is from Jim talking about the question earlier. Yeah, retoothing a saw, especially if it's a large panel saw or hand saw, they're gonna take you a while, and it's a solid day in the shop of playing with a file. Not very useful. I find it much easier to just go shopping and find a saw that has the right TPI and then shape the teeth to whatever I want. Have you ever tried inlaid dovetails? From Fred. I don't know what you mean by inlaid dovetails. Are you talking about like half-blind dovetails? In which case, yes. I don't like doing half-blind dovetails as much because I like showing off my work. But I guess I'm just a little more flashy. I don't know what you mean by inlaid dovetails. So send me further down, Fred. I'll answer it down there. Variable saws are engraved. My 14 TPI is a crosscut. I think you're saying Veritas saws are engraved, in which case, yes, they most old saws actually have a number underneath the grip. You'll see a number down below, and that's the number of TPI they are originally cut with. It's always fun when you find one that's like 8 TPI and they're obviously cut to 4 TPI or something like that. But most reliable hand saw manufacturers now actually will stamp the TPI on the plate. How you made your hot iron brand stamp. This is from Julio. My brand that I use to stamp things, I actually used an online company. I can't remember what the name is. Shapeways. Shapeways.com. They will actually 3D print the head out of, I think I used stainless steel for it. And it was kind of cool. And so I drew up the design in, did I? I'm sorry, this was like 2 years ago when I made it, so I'm trying to remember what exactly I did. But I think I used, no, I can't remember which program I used. I think it was SketchUp. I'm pretty sure it was SketchUp that I actually designed the head in. And so I made my logo and extruded it. And then I put a post on the back that was a 1/4 inch. And I had them print it and ship it out to me. And it was like $14. And on that post, I then cut in threads so that I could thread on a nut. And that's my handle. I think I have an old video on that. If you look back, search Wood by Wright branding iron, you'll probably come across that old video. The video itself is probably pretty bad, so sorry about that, but that's what happens when they're old ones. But yeah, I think that was back then. I think that was about 2 years ago. That I use that thing all the time. I love that little branding iron. For cutting dovetails on thinner softwood stock, i.e. 3/8 thick or less, do you have any suggestions for a good saw TPI? Well, the smaller your teeth are, usually the cleaner the cut you're going to get. So that's kind of the back and forth. I don't... I have one dovetail saw that has a 20 TPI, and that is too small because I really can't sharpen it. Yes, I could spend the time and get really close to it and sharpen it, but I don't like that. I usually don't go much any smaller than 16 TPI because I can still sharpen a 16 TPI. It's tedious, but I can, and that's what my dovetail saw is, 16 TPI. And I like that. For me, it gives it a clean enough cut. 16 is still aggressive enough that it is a good TPI for dovetails. I don't espouse to that you need a different TPI for softwood as you do for hardwood. But yeah, everyone's a little different. But I think to answer your question, 16 TPI will do you well. Do you have a video with the ABCs of setting up a plane for beginners? Yes, I actually have a video on setting up a smoothing plane, I think is the name of it. If you search Wood by Wright setup smoothing plane, you'll come across it. And in that, I'm not actually talking about the general setup for a smoothing plane, but I go into the little ins and outs of what I do. And if you can actually set up a smoothing plane, you can set up any plane. If you can set it to a very fine tolerance for a smoothing plane, you can set it for a thick and heavy cut that you would need for other things. So definitely look that up. But who knows? I might need to do another one for just a general setup video. Might be a good idea. That was Benjamin de Bellis. John Burkett. I have a few of those low-numbered planes that he restored. Yes. Yeah, there. For some reason, old Stanley planes, there is a collector's market, and the smaller the number gets, the more expensive. And if you ever come across a number one, if you can find a number one in decent quality, not perfect, but decent quality, you're still looking at like $900 to $1,000 for that one plane. And then you restore it, and the price drops off because then the collectors don't want it anymore, which I find to be funny, even though it would still work. Although, who would ever use a number one? I don't know what you would use a number one for. Hello from Southern Illinois, Ed Reese. Hey, Ed, how's it going? Yeah. Hello from Northern Illinois. Where would a wire wheel on a grinder work for paint removal? Yes, you can use a wire wheel, but you're not going to be able to get into all those nooks and crannies. You know, I guess you could use like a wire wheel on a rotozip. You're never going to get into all the little spaces, but it will remove paint well. Don B., you're in Lancaster. Cool. Yeah, I actually used to live in Burton Hand, which is just outside of Lancaster. So, yeah. Where at in VA? I'm going to be, let's see. I'm going to be in several different places because I'm going to a friend's wedding that will be down by Williamsburg, and but I'll be driving all over the place. So I'll be up in DC. So I don't know. I'd like to do a meetup down there sometime, but I don't know exactly when or where. But I don't know. We'll see. If you don't have a sander or sandpaper, what should I use? The only time I generally use sandpaper is if I can't get a plane in there, or if for some reason I can't work with a scraper in the space. So rounded surfaces, for handles and things like that, I use a sandpaper. But for most things, I don't actually use sandpaper that much. I finish most of my surfaces either with a scraper or with a very, very well set hand plane. And I have several videos on how to set up a hand plane for smoothing, even for figured woods. It can be done. And so, yeah, that's what I generally don't mess with sandpaper that much. Any plans for going to Midwest Tool Collectors Meetup in Napani this weekend? I don't know where Napani is. So I guess no. I will be going to the one in Milwaukee on the 26th of February. And there's a couple in Illinois I'll be going to. I would like to go to the next national, since I didn't get to go to the national in the fall. But we'll see. Can I put poly over a well-dried Danish oil? Yes, you can. You want to make sure that it is well and cured. Poly is a little bit more giving, especially if it's an oil-based poly. If it's a water-based poly, you might want to be careful with that and test it first. But even if that's the problem, put down a quick layer of shellac, and then you can put your poly on top of that. That's actually what I did for my kids' workbench. I covered the whole thing in boiled linseed oil. I let it sit for like 2 hours. So only that amount of time. I put shellac right on top of the boiled linseed oil after sitting for 2 hours. I let the shellac sit overnight, and then I put on a water-based poly over the top of it. And that worked very well. Shellac is a fantastic sealer, and it will bind with anything. So it is a great in-between. Thanks for... sorry, reading questions down below. I found the magazine with the spring pole lathe. Cool. Yeah, that's I love popular woodworking. It is a great magazine. I like their balance with hand tool, power tool. They don't really take sides or push one or the other, and they have a really good broad education. I like that magazine. Hello from Brazil. Well, hello. I'm almost getting to the end of these comments, so booyah. Jason Donnie, thanks for answering my question. Western saws with good steel aren't very common in my country. Hardened teeth types are plentiful, so I'll try that for now. Yeah, I guess if you can't find them, I don't know what country you're in, but yeah, in the U.S. they're all over the place, but I guess if you're going to be in other countries, that's not always the case. Whereas in Europe, it is hard to find a metal-bodied plane, whereas you can find wooden-bodied planes everywhere. Where around here, wooden-bodied planes are a little less common, and metal planes are everywhere. So everywhere you go, it's going to be a little different. Cool, Williamsburg's only about 2.5 hours from me. Sounds good. Yeah, I don't know where I want to meet out there, but if someone wants to find a place that might be good, I'd be willing to work with you and see if we can set up a meetup out there. James, I've recently restored a Stanley number 45. The vinegar bath removed all the surface rust and some of the nickel plating. Besides using chemicals, how would you remove the rest of the plating? Plating is... I don't know of a good way of removing plating. If anyone else on here has an idea of removing the nickel plating, I don't know. On the one plane, I have a 55 that actually came from John Burkett here in the comments. That one, the plating is all still on it, but my 45 is speckled, some plating and some not. And I'm just living with it that way, so I guess it's not something I think that much about. But yeah, I don't know of a way of taking off plating that is fully adhered still. Be interesting to try though. Might want to try a wire brush. I don't know if sandblasting would even, but who knows? Sorry, I can't help you on that one. Let's see. Look for Speed Blaster. It's a mini handheld sandblaster for a good price. Yeah, actually, Harbor Freight, if you're in the U.S., has this little handheld sandblaster. It's like $20. Works fantastically. I used to use one of those. You have to fill up the hopper quite a bit with sand. I actually go to the big box store and buy a 50-pound bag of silica sand. It's often used for play sand and things like that, but if you look for 100% silica sand, that's great for sandblasting, and it's like $5 for a 50-pound bag. I found it really enjoyable restoring planes. Oh, my throat is going. Anything that would help for just those types of projects would be awesome. I have a huge pile of tools that I need to restore, but finding time to do it is the painful part. As soon as I get through this dresser, I'm going to have a lot more time for some of these other little things. But yeah, I'd like to get back into restoring. I have a lot of things on it. Fred mentioned, Paul Sellers mentions in one of his videos that his masters he apprenticed under only went to 400 grit. Is going to a lower level of sharpening going to lowered after a couple strokes? Is it worth it? Whatever grit you would normally sand wood to is really only as far down as you need to go with a hand plane, because you're going to be putting that grit of scratches into your blade. And so if you're going down to a 400 grit on your iron, you're going to be leaving scratches that would be just as the same as a 400 grit sandpaper. So honestly, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. Where going to higher grit really makes a big difference is when it becomes easier to push through the wood, and so there's less resistance, and also the blade, the edge retention is longer. So if you go up to 1,000 grit or up to finer than that, your edge will last longer because there are less points that are microscopic that can be torn. And so usually, like my highest stone is 1,200, and then I go with a strop. You're not going to be able to tell the difference between sharpening it to 400 and 1,000 or 16,000 in general use. It will be easier to push through the wood, but you're not going to be able to tell much difference in the actual finish of the wood. So yeah, for the longest time, 250 to 400 grit was the highest grit that you had as a stone. And the newer standards for going to higher than 400 grit are really only something that's come about in the last 100 years. So it's not natural. And as soon as you put a finish on it, you're never going to be able to feel the surface again. You're not going to be able to tell the difference between those. So yeah, if you don't have anything to go higher than 400 grit, there's no real reason to. Your edge will last longer if you go higher, and it will be easier to push through the wood if you go higher. And so there are benefits there, but you don't need to. Use an older nickel coin and oil. Works wonderful. This is from John Burkett. How to take plating off. Huh, sounds interesting. Yes, 90% of the saws are made in Philadelphia. Very true. Yes, Diston pumped out I don't know how many saws, and they all say Philadelphia. Well, at least most of his, the old ones don't, but that's a different story. James, I know someone who just got 3 number 80 cabinet scrapers at an auction. Are there different bevel angles that could be used on each so that 3 could provide different purposes? No. The bevel angle really has nothing to do with how it cuts, because you're using the back of it and you're turning a burr. Just like you would on a car scraper, you're actually putting a burr on the scraper. So no, there really isn't a difference to put a different angle on there. Yeah. You just need to have a burr that is in the right orientation to be able to scrape at the angle that the cabinet scraper holds it at. And after that point, it doesn't matter. The angle on the back traditionally was cut at 45 degrees, but you could cut it just about anything you want. You could leave it square if you wanted to. Doesn't really make much difference. Do you need me to send you a rawhide hammer for your leather work? Yeah, I am very, very sorry to the leather people out there. I was using a metal hammer on my leather tools, and if you are a leather person, that is a big, big no-no. I have a mallet that I used to use for it, but I could not find it for the life of me. And the punches that I were using were the cheapos from Harbor Freight, so I really didn't care about them, so I was just doing that. But yes, for the video's sake, I'm sorry I was using a metal hammer. I will never let it happen again. But I wasn't going to be using my wooden mallets on it, so I just decided to use the metal hammer. Sorry about that, Chris. But Gregory Caramel says that if plating is mostly good, evaporest won't lift the good nickel plating. Yeah, I really like evaporest for most rust removal. The only problem I have with it is so expensive. Yeah, vinegar baths is cheaper. But evaporest will do a faster, cleaner job than vinegar usually. With inlaid dovetails, you do a double tail. I saw it on Katz Moses' channel. Are you saying where there is a smaller dovetail inside of a larger dovetail? Usually those are called, they're called a bunch of different things, but I've heard them called wolf's teeth, and a couple other things, but I can't remember right now. I have done them before. I haven't done them in a while. They're just kind of cool and fun. I don't know if there's really any physical difference for them other than they look cool. At least I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, because I haven't seen Katz Moses' video on that. I'll have to look it up, though. I like his channel. Totally skipped my question. Sorry, Chris. I don't think I saw it. In all of your tools... Oh, I see it there. Sorry. In all of your tools and woodworking, what purchase was the biggest waste in your opinion? This is from Chris Lair. Man, I don't know. The biggest waste. That is a good question. I need to think about that one. I don't know if I have one that's really been a big waste. I think in my whole career of woodworking, it's probably a dovetail jig, like for the router box. That thing was just, yeah, it wasn't for me. But I think most of the time the biggest waste was when I bought something because I wanted the tool and I didn't have a particular need for it. In other words, I saw a tool, it was on sale, I had to have it, I bought it. As opposed to, I need this tool to complete this task. I don't think I have much regret for a tool that I purchase when I have a particular need for it. If I buy a tool for a supposed need sometime in the future, that's when I'm probably going to regret something. I have a lot of that when I was all power tools. I had a lot of jigs and setups and things like that made work faster and easier. And I have a lot of regret on a lot of those things because they weren't as much fun. So that's a good question, Chris. I'll have to think about that one. I might have to turn that into something else. Good night, Christopher. See you next time. Thanks for being here. I wanted to hear him answer that one too. Oh yeah, sorry. That was a good question. I have a number 4 Stanley Handyman that I have been thinking about making into a scrub plane. Any tips on shaping and cutting the iron? Yeah, actually I have an entire video on turning a cheap plane into a scrub plane, and that's a great use for it. I actually have a large piece of 60 grit sandpaper. When I mean a large piece, I mean a roll that's 20 inches wide by 20 feet long. It used to be on a large industrial belt sander. And I lay that out on the concrete floor and I do my beveling on that. The next easiest thing is to get a hand crank grinder. That's great. Or if you don't have a problem with it, go grab a regular grinder. Just make sure you don't heat up the iron so much that it changes it chemistry. It softens the steel. With a scrub plane, you can't go wrong. Even if your bevel isn't perfectly round, it doesn't matter. It's a scrub plane. Just put a camber on it and it'll do fine. You really can't mess it up. Sorry, if I missed anyone's question, go ahead and repost it. I'm trying to keep up with these, but sometimes I don't always get them. Yeah, a lot of people like Evaporust. Yeah, it's good stuff. It was actually the first tool I ever restored I used Evaporust on. And I've used it quite a few times since then. Anytime I have something delicate, I might use Vaporust. I just always have a bath of vinegar ready to go. And my bath of vinegar, I'll let it sit for 6 months or so. And it still works. On point with the last name this time. Nice pronunciation. Sorry. I would have thought the biggest waste would have been a tool belt. No, I actually have well, I used to have, well, no, yeah, I still have my tool belt because I used to do a lot of construction, and I like a tool belt. I, I don't use all of the pockets in my apron. When I first got it, I used all the pockets and I constantly had tools on me. But then I suddenly realized that in my current shop, my my bench is right in front of me, and all my tools are within hand's reach right here. And so everything is right here, and I have no reason to carry the tools on me when I can just turn around and grab it. So I don't actually carry tools around on me very much anymore. What are the typical uses for 130? For the 130? Daughter picked one up from me in... Sorry, I'm going to have to look up what the number 130 is. I don't know that one off the top of my head. Let me search this. I'll probably kick myself in just a moment. Stanley. Oop. Stanley 130. Images. Oh yeah, the flip nose. It gives you two different angle. If I remember correctly, that's the one where it gives you the two different bed angles, so you can have a lower angle and a higher angle. Or no. The 130 is the one that has the bullnose edge on it, so you can actually get up closer to things. The larger the sole is in front of the iron, the easier it is to cut because you're not going to be skipping into things. Whereas a bullnose allows you to get up closer to things. So if you're coming along the edge, it's fantastic for that. But in a block plane, I don't know if there's that much of a difference, but it's a good one. I have never played with one, though, so it would be fun to. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? A woodchuck could chuck as much wood as a woodchuck could chuck wood. Does that answer your question? Thanks, John. I just got my first plane for Christmas. I can turn a chunk of 2x4 into a toothpick in under an hour. Very true. The hardest thing to learn with a hand plane is when to stop. Do you use chrome oxide on your leather strop? Yes, the green stuff. I'll actually, the stuff I'm using is zinc oxide, not chrome oxide. Well, my main strop I have chrome oxide on, though I have zinc oxide on all of my other strops. There's basically no difference between them. At least I can't tell a difference, but yeah, that's about the way it goes. So yeah, I guess that I'm gonna have to end it here in a moment. So if you have any other last minute questions, send them up. Otherwise, I'm gonna wrap this up. My number 131 is just a display piece. I hear the pivots are very fragile. I don't know. I've never played with one. It would be fun to though. So yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I'm liking doing this about once a month. It seems to be the right frequency for these. So if you guys have any thoughts or questions, feel free to send me an email anytime. I have several people who regularly email me and say, hey, here's a question for you, and I'll answer it and get that up. If it ever becomes too much of a problem, I'll change my email address. So no, but truly, this has been a lot of fun. So making sure there's no last minute questions. That's about it. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Now you get to sit here for the time while I try and figure out how to stop this. There's the stop button. See y'all later.